Right, it's Andrew Culkin here on Fire Breathing Rob. And again, the book is Amanda, A Cautionary Tale, AmandaCautionaryTale.com. And then on Facebook too, it's the same thing, Amanda Cautionary Tale. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on. Greatly appreciate your time today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All
Yeah.
right. So let's kick this around, Andrew. Tell the audience a little bit about you first before we get into this interview and that meat and potatoes of it.
Well, though, to begin with, I was an insurance broker. My wife and I were insurance brokers for, 25, 30 years. And really the book is about, I really want to design, it's designed to help families understand alcoholism and uh, to understand it before it gets out of hand and to seek help for people before it gets out of hand, like with my wife, for example, because I was woefully ignorant of what was really going on. I mean, initially she would drink, she'd come home from work when we were in our 30s, 30 years ago, and have a bottle of wine. There's a lot of stress. We had quotas and there's a lot of driving and you got to deal with clients. And she would have a bottle of wine almost every night. And within 10 years, that small bottle of wine became 2 bottles of wine or became 2 liters of wine every night. And it created a habit that I didn't understand. And eventually it started really affecting her life and our life and the life of our family.
So I want to talk about this because personally, I'm not a drinker. I haven't drank any alcohol. Not that I was a drinker before that. I drank a little bit in college, like every college kid for the most part does.
That's where it all starts. Yeah.
Nothing extreme though. Like
Right.
some people I know really got bombed every night. This was, on certain occasions. But regardless of that, we're not talking about my college escapades. We'll move forward past that. So I don't drink. I haven't drank since 2013. If I had a small drink of alcohol now, I'd probably be bombed after
Right.
after that. But
Well,
regardless of
that's a good thing.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So as a person that's not a drinker,
Mhm.
I can't really come to the thought of how this starts. Can you talk to people about how this, and I know your wife's situation, you guys are in stressful jobs, but can we talk about that in general, how
Well,
this starts?
it's a mental health disease. It's a disease. It's no different than cancer or heart disease. And
Yeah.
when you create a habit, I mean, they say it takes like 30 to 60 days to create a habit, but after 10 years, you're in serious trouble, very serious trouble, because you've created a habit that you can't get out of. And it becomes part of your life. The alcohol actually affects you physically, emotionally, and mentally. It's an addiction and you can't stop. And there's nothing you can do to make a person stop emotionally. It doesn't make any difference. Amanda went through 7 rehabs.
Oh,
I mean, she was in jail. She a couple times. She had 4 DUIs. She was in several accidents. She gained quite a bit of weight because of the alcohol, and nothing could stop her. There's nothing in the family dynamic that could get her to stop, and it's a disease. So what I wrote the book about is for people to, you know, recognize that their loved one has a problem. And just like
yeah.
stage 4 cancer, if you get cancer at stage 1, you have a better chance of survival. Unfortunately, in Amanda's case, we didn't really get her help until she was in like stage 3 or 4. And she'd already been drinking, on a daily basis for 15, 18 years before she started getting into the rehab process.
So I did have a great uncle that was personally an alcoholic. His
Right,
wife died. He was in his older ages,
right,
talking about 60s and 70s. And I would go over there when I was in college, and
right,
I would drive up to Orlando. He would live, he lived in Orlando. I was in college in South Florida in Boca Raton. I
right.
drive up sometimes, go to Disney, see him and stuff. And he would drink Southern Comfort. That was his drink. And once I would see him all the time, and
Right,
every time I saw him, he was drunk at night. And
right.
as you said, and this kind of gets to the story too. As you said, it's very hard you can't just say, hey, you got to quit. And somebody says, okay, and that's it. So with him, what I would do, which it didn't make a difference because he was going to go out and buy it again. But I
Right.
would steal the Southern Comfort bottles, and
Right.
as I told you, I don't drink alcohol, but I
Right.
would steal them and bring them home, and I would go over there and he'd say, "Did you take my bottle?" I say, "No, I don't."
Right.
He'd say, "I don't know where it went," and he'd be going crazy and say, "I got to
Of
go out
course.
and buy one." So he'd go out and buy it again, and
Right.
when I was up there again, I'd steal it again, and I'm trying to do something that's beneficial to him.
Right. You
So,
think you are. You think you are.
right, it's out of sight, out of mind, is what I'm thinking.
Right.
But it's not.
There's
And
nothing. It has,
yeah, go ahead.
you're not. You're actually not helping him at all. You think you are, but you're not.
Right.
You know.
So, what would you say in that in the situation like that where he's passed on now? He
Oh,
died
sure.
in his 80s, but
Right.
um, somebody like that you think, like you said, I thought I was helping him, but he's going to go out and buy it anyway. And
Well,
I'm
when
not
some
living there 24/7, 365 to just keep stealing the alcohol. And he's going to catch on regardless. He's not a dummy.
Of
So,
course not. Well, the only thing you can do, there's only two things you can do. I mean, if the person can't stop, they have to have an intervention and they have to be into a program. And
yeah.
they have to have the self-actualization to say, hey, I got a problem. Until the person actually owns that they have a problem, there is no hope for that person. There's nothing that you can say that's going to influence that person to stop drinking. I mean, nothing. You either have to remove that person from your life, or you have to really get on that person so that they get into a rehab facility or get into an AA situation where they're actually doing the work and going to meetings every single day. The thing is with alcoholism, when someone's an alcoholic, they're going to be an alcoholic until the day they die.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that. Even if you don't drink for 20 years, you could drink again, and the whole process, the whole relapse process, could start all over again. So it's something that you have to work on for the rest of your life, and it's a mental health disease. A lot of people don't realize that. They just think, "Oh, can't this person just stop?" Like it's going to be willpower, like someone can will themselves to stop. It makes about as much sense as saying, "Well, I have pancreatic cancer, and I'm going to will the cancer out of my body." You have about as much chance of that happening. Okay, it's not going to happen. Nobody can escape alcoholism on their own. You need support, you need foundation, and you need to do the work on a regular basis. You know.
Andrew Culkin here on Fire Breathing Around. Andrew, I want to get into this. So,
Sure.
I know that my great uncle, I'm sure he had problems from drinking for sure, because he did that for quite a while.
Yeah. What was the core problem that he had? You know.
Right. And I know he had heart issues, and I was worried about that because I'm sure, that would, drinking that kind of alcohol consistently
Right.
is going to take a beating on your whole body in
Oh,
general,
everywhere.
every organ in general. Let me ask you this. For someone that has this kind of, and this person passes on with you as somebody that was extremely close to you,
Right.
how do you not take this personally and say, I should have saw the signs. I should have done this and that. And you could beat yourself up to kingdom come, but you're
Right.
not going to bring that person back. So how did you, not beat yourself up and kind of just say, hey, I'm going to help other people by writing this book and doing these talks?
Well, I think what happened was after she died, you are beat up. You're emotionally beat up.
Sure.
But when she died, it was almost a relief in a sense because it was so much trauma for myself and my son. It was just a lot of
Yeah.
trauma. I mean, the police were at our house. I had to worry if she was going to take the car and go kill somebody every day. You never knew, you
Oh,
know.
wow.
And you had to hide car keys. I had hide bank accounts. I had to hide every aspect. Like when I took a shower in the morning, I had to hide my own keys. You take the car and just be gone. So there's a lot of stress. So, and you have to realize it's not me. You have to separate yourself from the disease. I didn't have it. I wasn't forcing the alcohol down her throat.
Right.
So you have to separate that, even as a husband and wife. Now, the most difficult, I think, relationship is when you have a parent and a child that's an alcoholic. That's a very difficult because you have to allow that child to fail. You have to let them fail. If they have to be homeless to understand what's going on, you got to let them fail because that's the only way they're going to grow and to accept responsibility of this disease. And I talk to a lot of kids at rehabs for the same conversation. Talk to families. Families tend to um, allow their kids to remain in a childlike state by drinking and taking drugs. You know,
Yeah.
they
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. But it's a big issue. The reason why I wrote this is prevention, so people can identify when there's someone in their life before it gets out of hand. Because you have a better chance of getting someone help at the earlier stages. When someone's 10, 15 down the road, they have maybe a 10 to 15% chance of survival at all. And they're
So,
probably going to die from the disease.
so let's talk about the signs and the prevention. What signs should people look out for right away so they can nip this in the butt before it gets out of control?
Well, the biggest one is the habit. If they're drinking every day. Number two is if they're drinking in isolation, if they drink by themselves, if they're hiding alcohol. Amanda would hide, like you have bookshelves there. Amanda would hide bottles of wine and beer cans behind the books.
Okay.
Who looks behind books? She'd hide them underneath the bed. She'd hide them underneath furniture. So if someone is isolating, they're drinking by themselves, they're lying about drinking, and they drink every day. Those are three red flags.
But was she hiding the alcohol at the beginning, or was this just after maybe you or your son confronted her about this?
No, she was hiding alcohol on a regular basis. We knew where she was drinking wine in the early days. When we were in our 30s. But 10 years down the road, she knew that I didn't want her to drink anymore, and it was becoming divisional in our own relationship. It's very difficult when someone is have a relationship with someone who's drunk all the time or headed towards that direction.
Now, did you give up alcohol when?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really drink that much.
Okay.
I mean,
No, I
alcohol's never really been a part of my life. I mean, I have a cigar on the weekend, and I might have two shots of whiskey, and that takes me. I might sip on it for 3 hours. I don't really drink. I mean,
right.
I might have a beer every 2 weeks, a case
Yeah,
of beer.
whatever. Yeah.
In fact, I buy a 12-pack of beer that'll last me 3 months.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fair.
I mean,
Whatever.
it's not
Yeah.
part of my life.
The
Yeah,
social thing. It's not
right.
anything that's a daily activity.
No.
Okay, because I was just wondering that maybe if you drank, you would quit just to make sure that she didn't
Oh,
see you drinking, I guess.
it was a solo activity on her part completely. Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Now, how old was your son at the time of this?
Well, she was had a problem before he was born, but
Okay.
her longest stage where she stopped was when she was pregnant with him. So she didn't drink for that 9 month period. Thank
Wow.
goodness.
So she did have the will to do it.
Well, yeah, when you're with child, that's usually a pretty good motivation. But that was early
Right.
on too. That
Well,
was early
hey,
on.
people are doing.
I mean, he's 22 years old now. She
Okay.
died. She died 2 years ago. So
Right.
well, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he grew up with it. He really only remembers her as having a drinking problem. That's really all
Yeah.
he'll ever remember, unfortunately.
Right.
Part of the problem was she was a very nice person. She was very kind. She wasn't like an evil drunk, a
Right.
bitchy drunk. But she was, I'm sorry. She'd be very apologetic, and it was a difficult personality to be mad at, in a sense, because she was aware of the problem, but she just couldn't do anything about it.
So you reacted obviously a certain way. It was your wife. Obviously, you've known her for a long time. You lived with her for a long time.
Sure.
I'm sure your son had different reactions as being a young teen, a young child growing up with this. What about the rest of the family? How did they react? And how should a family that's going through this react?
Well, fortunately, her family really just kind of left it up to me.
Oh,
I was with you. My
yeah.
family lives in New York, so they weren't really aware of it, until later, until much later. Like my parents stayed with me, maybe 10 years ago, and they saw that she was, falling down, and I told them about it. But that's another thing. Alcoholics want to make it secret. They don't want to tell anybody. They don't want to expose themselves. They don't want to be exposed for what's really going on. and there's a lot of shame involved. That's
Mhm.
another thing that I want to expose. Why should you be, why should you be shamed because you have this disease? We don't shame people when they have cancer and they have no hair because they're going through chemo. We shouldn't be shaming people who are alcoholics or drug addicts because they have a disease, and we have to view them as having a disease instead of ridiculing and forcing shame on these people. We need to realize that they need help, and we need to look at them as a patient that needs help rather than as a condescending finger. That doesn't help anybody.
Right. I agree with that
That
too.
makes sense.
Yeah, I think, that's something in a societal issue that we make fun of people and
Hmm.
degrade people that, are alcoholics,
Hmm.
that get involved in drugs. Some of
Right,
these people, this is not their fault, and we should be trying to help these people get past this and live, better, healthier lives.
right,
Instead, we're putting them down and, acting like they're losers, and
right.
obviously they're not.
They're not.
I want to move into this and just go a little bit deeper into this. When we talk about an intervention,
Hmm.
and I know you kind of dabbled into this very, a little bit earlier on, but
Right.
let's talk about the intervention. Did you have an intervention with Amanda? Was there, many interventions and they just didn't pan out? How did all
Well,
that?
yeah, we would have an intervention. It would just get to the point where I would have to say, I'm either leaving or you're going into a rehab facility. And the
Wow.
intervention was just between myself and her. And then she would come to the point where, she needs help. She realized that she would need help. She couldn't stop drinking. She was very sick. I mean, we're talking about somebody who was throwing up, passing out, falling down the stairs. She recognized in herself that she needed help. So she would go to a rehab facility and it would be wonderful. There was a lot of support, emotional support. You can talk about your problems. You're around like-minded people. And it's a very wonderful situation for someone who's going, through alcoholism.
Why do
You
you
know?
feel like, because she went through the rehab quite a few times, why do you feel like it never panned out fully?
Well, because she didn't do the follow-up work. And the problem that I have with rehabs, and this is what I talk about a lot, is
Okay.
that there's no checks and balances. There's no follow-up. Once you leave the rehab, they basically give you a list of AA meetings to go to,
No one's
and then
checking in with you
and then
then.
you need to go find an accountability partner. Okay, so that's like saying, well, you have open heart surgery. Why don't you go perform open heart surgery on yourself? I mean,
Right.
there's no you can't force somebody to go to
Yeah.
these meetings and to find and seek help. So once a person goes back into their own environment, they retreat right back into their own ways. So the rehab becomes nothing more than a revolving door and a band-aid for 30
What do
days.
you feel like would be a better policy for either the rehab facility or just in general to make sure that the people that go there don't slip back down this bad path?
Well, what any suggestions I have would be very controversial, but I think
Okay.
these rehabs get paid a lot of money. It's like 30, 40, 50, 60,000 bucks for the insurance company, or if somebody just wants to go in for 30 days. So I think
Wow.
I think the rehabs should be penalized if someone is not successful. There has to be some kind of incentives in place
Yeah.
to the rehab to make sure these people are successful, because a 5 to 10% success rate is not successful.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's horrendous.
Horrendous. I mean,
Gee.
after they say maybe 40% might get through the first year, but then it just drops. It just
Gee.
drops.
Gosh. Wow. That's
It,
terrible.
it,
Excuse me. I didn't know that was that
yeah,
bad.
rehab facilities are not very successful. I would like to say they have more like a 90 to 95% failure rate.
Jeez.
And
I
I think
mean,
sometimes, to some degree, they're designed to help the family, because it was great for my son and I. We got a 30-day break. you know? I mean, I used to have to put my wife into a rehab facility so I could go on vacation and go see my family in New York. You know,
wow. That's
and they
sad.
got to that point. So it was sad. We'd come home and we'd get her and we'd come back. And it never lasted more than a month out of rehab, because she didn't do the AA meetings, and she just wouldn't do the follow up work and do the work. And do what she had to do.
Yeah.
She just never took ownership of the problem. And when you don't take ownership of the problem, the alcohol is the drive for alcoholism is stronger than the drive to get well.
Again, for everybody listening, Andrew Culkin here on Fire Breathing Rob. Definitely like and subscribe and share this podcast. Again, the book is Amanda Cautionary Tale. You can go to amandacautionarytale.com for more information. Also, it's the same on Facebook, Amanda Cautionary Tale. Definitely check it out there for more information. Andrew, as we move toward the end of this show, can
Uh-huh.
you tell people what you hope they got out of this interview today?
Well, I hope people are able to recognize in a loved one if they're having an issue, if they are isolating, if they are chronically drinking, if they're drinking more than 6 or 7 drinks in a week, they have an issue. And if they're doing any kind of chronic drinking, it's a red flag. And if they're starting to lie about their drinking, that's a red flag. And you need to open it up instead of squashing the conversation. This is when you need to create a conversation. You need to open up a conversation, and you need to figure out which direction to go for that person. In some ways, the person is going to be very defiant, and if they're very defiant, well, then maybe you have to make the decision. How important is that relationship? Maybe you yourself need to separate yourself from that relationship. It just depends on if it's a husband and wife or if it's a child. Or depends on what the relationship is with that loved one. But if someone is, if they're drinking by themselves on a daily basis, they have an issue. It needs to be talked about, and you either need a rehab facility or they need to start getting outside counseling, or they need to certainly do AA meetings. That's the most tried and successful organization of all time is Alcoholics Anonymous. Sure.
So let's end with this. So,
Okay.
we have been teasing, obviously, the website, um, also the Facebook too.
Right.
As far as that goes, is there any other place where they could find more information or get in touch with you, wherever it may be?
Well, you might have my Facebook group. We talk about these issues on a weekly basis. I have meetings there. It's at amandacautionarytale.com. Got several hundred people in that group that we go over. I make YouTube videos on this subject. You can find me on YouTube underneath the same name. I'm actually doing a TED Talk next year on the same subject, TEDx. We've been working on a speech for quite a while. I'd like to actually, um, at the point of service, I would like to, for people that have 2 or more DUIs, driving under the influences, maybe have a designation on their driver's license so that we can no longer sell to them if they have DUIs. This is something that I would like to see, some legislature passed, because there are people who have 2 or more DUIs. They're a danger to themselves and to everybody around themselves. So if we can stop them at the point of service, I'd like to call it Amanda's Law after my wife. Those are the things that I'm working on, and those are things that you'll be able to find me in the future.
And I do appreciate your time, Andrew, today. And thanks so much for coming on.
All right. Well, thanks so much.